Hey, we will get started in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, I will go ahead and get started, and we will wait until we at least get one more person in here to start the Kahoot. But if you guys want to go ahead and join the game when we get enough players to play, we will kick that off. If not, after a couple of minutes, we will just go with the folks that we have here. And in the meantime, I'm going to quickly go over week 14 stuff from last week, and then the week 15 things. All right, so week 14, we are talking about information security procedures and methodologies. So this, if you are following along in your books, and there's books available in the Slack, it is chapter 1, 4, 5, and 6, and 7 and 14 in the Messier book, and chapter 1 in the Walker textbook. So we're talking about information security procedures. Okay, so specifically, we're talking about cryptography, PKI, digital signatures, and PGP, security architecture, service-oriented architectures, information security incidents, interior application design, TCP and IP, some more in security testing methodology. So this is 8% of your exam. And you'll notice when we do next week, which is going to be weeks 15 and 16, or, as far as the materials, because we combine the tools in the 3 different weeks, you'll see that those sections go relatively quickly. So what we're going to do next week is we're going to do an end-to-end ethical hacking on the Broken Web app using the tools that we've discussed over the last few weeks. So the materials for the next 2 weeks, for the next 2 lectures that we'll cover next week, will be relatively quick, and then we will go over all of the tools that you'll need to know both for your test and then also for your future lives in ethical hacking, if you choose to go down that road. All right, so cryptography. Cryptography, can you guys hear me? I probably should have made sure of that first.
I can hear you.
All right, cool. All right, cryptography. This is the science of studying and protecting information. It's the practice of hiding data. When you think about cryptography, we're talking about different encryptions that are being used to encrypt information so that it can be sent to and from different locations without someone seeing it. So we know when we think about technologies such as Telnet, which is sent in the clear, information is just sent like out in the open. So anyone sniffing on the wire will be able to see, everything that you type in there, whether it's a username or password, or it's whatever commands that you do in Telnet. So all of that information is exposed. So what they try to do, at least for example, when you're doing transactions on the web, or if you are sending emails or almost anything else, they try to ensure that it is encrypted, and then so that when it's in motion and also when it's at rest. Okay, so we generally talk about 2 different types of encryption. We talk about symmetric key. Symmetric just means same. So this just means that there's the same key is used to encrypt and decrypt data. And then we also talk about asymmetric key, which means 2 different keys. And so these keys are related through a mathematical equation. So I believe that this is where they use like 2 closely related prime numbers that are related, to have a relationship to it mathematically, to be able to, and those are known as a key pair. And those keys are basically so that you can encrypt your message and decrypt it. So each person has their own public key and their own private key. So when you send a message to someone, you're going to use your private key and their public key to send it, so that you ensure 2 things. You ensure that you can be able, they know that it came from you, but then they also know that it's intended for them. So you have, our bonus triad member non-repudiation. Okay. So, and the private key is in fact to be kept private. All right, let's see. All right, so substitution cipher. So one of the easiest substitution ciphers that you will see is just a simple alphabetic rotation. So you'll see this, for example, on like ROT13 sites, so things of that nature. And it basically just says that for every time you see, for example, a letter A, that you replace it with one other letter. So in this case, in this example, you're replacing with the letter R. Okay, and so every time you see an A in the text, you'll have an R. So what that means is that the overall spacing of the text Everything else within the text is not changed because it's not sent, for example, in a stream or a block. It's just a simple substitution. So you could run them together, or you could just leave them with spaces and just do a simple substitution. And these are pretty easy to spot because then you can just run them through, for example, ROT13.com, and it'll give you, all of the different rotations because there's a one-to-one relationship. So it's not like you have, two letters, which could be an A. It's just, a one-to-one. So a Venn square, which is what you see on the right, it basically provides the association between the letters. So in this case, if you'll see in the first column, you'll have, there's no rotation. So A is just an A. So that's not really a substitution, but it's one of the options. And then you have, for example, for every A that you substitute like a K, here. So, and this tells you like for every letter that you have in your message, you're replacing it with the letter in the column over here. So that's what this message is here. So you should just know, I've actually seen something like this in capture the flag competitions where they're saying, hey, here's the Venn square, and they want you to decipher the message. So you have to actually go through and, make all of by hand the substitutions. All right. So the next step, we're talking about Diffie-Hellman. Okay, so Diffie-Hellman is a key exchange protocol. It was developed for use for the key exchange process, and it's used in SSL and IPsec. Okay, so cryptographic keys are exchanged between users to allow the use of a cryptographic algorithm without transmitting data that would allow the key to be known. Okay, so one of the things that you have to deal with when you're talking about keys, like a private key and a public key, is how is the information being sent? So because the public key is public, it really doesn't matter how you send. But when you do a technology such as symmetric, where you have the same key, you have to take into consideration how it is that you're getting the key to the other person. So things like Diffie-Hellman, which is a key exchange protocol, are how those keys are exchanged between the people. So it's sent encrypted so that they'll have the same key that is being used for encryption and decryption. Okay, so that's what Diffie-Hellman is. DES. DES is one of the symmetric key algorithms. The types of questions that you'll see on your exam about this have to do with, which one of these is used for, symmetric key, right? So they'll give you, maybe, or which one of these is used for asymmetric keys. So they'll give you 3 symmetric keys and then the 1 asymmetric, and then you have to pick the asymmetric out of the list, okay? So for these, you should know a couple of things. You should know what exactly each type of encryption is, so whether it's symmetric or asymmetric, and then you should also know the size of the keys and the blocks. And then what type of cipher? So is it a stream cipher? Is it a block cipher? Because you'll get questions specifically saying, hey, which stream cipher something? And then you'll have 3 examples or 3 or 4 examples, and only one of them is a stream cipher, okay? So you should know down to that level when you're looking at the keys, okay? So with DES, you have a block cipher that uses a 56-bit key. 8 bits of this is reserved for parity. And then you have triple DES, which was implemented because DES was not secure enough, and it was easily crackable. And DES is deprecated for that matter. Deprecated just means that it's no longer being used actively as a cryptographic solution. Okay, so triple DES you'll see a lot of different times. There's a block size that has a 168-bit key. So you'll see that this is actually just 3 times as big as this key. It's more effective than DES, but it's also slower. So when you get to more complex algorithms, especially ones that have longer keys, the speed is one of the considerations that you have to take into consideration. So for example, like if you were to do a biometric scan or something, or if you were doing a password scan or a thumb scan, you don't want to have to wait, like 10 minutes in order between when you put your eye in or when you put your thumb in, and it actually comes back with, whether you're approved or not. So whatever algorithm you choose, you want to take into consideration how fast it is. So with triple DES, you have one key that encrypts the message, a second different key decrypts the message, and a third key is used to employ the encryption algorithm again. So this is said to be more secure than DES alone. You might see a question where we're saying, which one of these was a solution when DES was found to be insecure. Triple DES did come out, but actually AES was supposed to be the solution that came out afterwards. So just consider that if you see it. So AES, this replaced DES. So you'll see questions about this, as I just said, and based on the Rendell cipher. So it's a block cipher as opposed to a stream cipher that uses multiple key links and a block size of 128. So for this, you should know that there are 3 different keys. There's a 128, a 192, and a 256. And you should know that it has a block length of 128. Okay, so if nothing else, you should just remember what type of cryptographic solution it is, whether it's symmetric or asymmetric, what size are the key links, what are the block size, and then what type of block or stream or thing is it. All right, so asymmetric keys. So RSA is actually named after the 3 gentlemen that put together the algorithm. It is a public key cryptographic solution, which is asymmetric. So you should just know the public key and asymmetric are the same thing, just means that there's a different key. And it's widely used for the data encryption of email and other transactions over the internet. So the algorithm is uses a key that's based on a pair of very large prime numbers. Okay, so these prime numbers, as I mentioned earlier, have a mathematical relationship to them, but it's not something that you can, if you, for example, know one of the keys, that you can then figure out what the other key is. So, but the 2 keys have to have a mathematical relationship in order for it to be able to work. Okay, so you'll see in this graphic here that you have a send and they're sending some data. They're going to encrypt it, and they're going to get the ciphertext, and then they're going to decrypt it with their private key. And then it gets to the receiver as it is intended. All right, so next up is the ECC. So this is a type of asymmetric. For the most part, you're not asked a whole bunch about ECC or Diffie-Hellman. You'll see them, but you should just know that they fall on this side of the house. So ECC, similar to the way that we talked about the other one having a mathematical relationship, this one uses different points on an elliptical curve, as shown in the picture, with a logarithmic algorithm. Okay, so this is used for encryption and signatures, and it also uses less processing power than other methods. So you'll see this a lot of time in mobile devices or in places where they really don't have the time for the higher processing and the slower times for the other types calls. All right, so PKI. So I ended up, when I took my test, I saw a lot of these types of questions asking about PKI, so ask about the different parts of the PKI. So that's what you should know for this, okay? So it consists of a certificate authority and related systems, a set of hardware, software, people, policies, and procedures needed to create, manage, distribute, use, store, and revoke digital signatures, okay? So you should know that there's a certificate authority, or a CA. You might just see this on the exam as a CA. You should just know what that is. So it's a repository of certificates that it issues to users and it generates a key. And it can also revoke public key certificates. So if, for example, a certificate is accessed and it's no longer safe, then they'll revoke it so they can no longer be used for authentication. So when in a network, a CA is a trusted entity that issues, manages, and revokes the security credentials. And within a PKI, the CA works with registration authorities, also called RAs. Again, you might see that as just RA or CA, to verify information provided by the requester of the digital certificate. Okay, so you should know that CA and RA are the different parts of the PKI. All right, so other key components of the PKI system. You have a public key and a private key, as we stated before. The public key is the one that's going to be sent to and distributed to the public, so that they know, if they're sending something to you, they need to use your public key. And then you have the private key, which is what you're supposed to keep a secret. There's also a root certificate authority. You may have seen this, for example, if you use like cards or other means of authentication. And a trusted CA verifies the identity of the person and signs the root certificate. So it confirms that you are who you say you are when you go and give them your ID, and then they vouch for you from that point forward. The revocation list is a list of certificates that have been revoked by the CEH. So that means these are no longer valid. So one of the things that your system should be doing is checking the revocation list to make sure that it's not being used any longer. And then we also, as we discussed, this the CEH. So this issues certificates. It generates the public-private key pair. And there's a lot of different public-private key pairs. There's a lot of different very large prime numbers. So it's not like it's just based on like 2 prime numbers. So it could be used any set of large prime numbers. And the CEH also creates a digital certificate consisting of the user's public key. The certificate is signed by the CEH and its private key. So sometimes you may, if you're doing, for example, ethical hacking, you may come across, like, for example, like a private key that's stored on a person's computer. That's the same as a password, okay? Because, once the private key gets out, then, you can be able to decrypt and basically act like you're that person and read their mail, so they don't have any privacy anymore. And you know that within cybersecurity, we need confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So without any one of those 3 legs, then you don't have security anymore. All right, so digital certificates, right? So if you have ever looked at your certificates, this is probably what it looks like on the Windows machine. The PKI framework follows the X509 standard. I did see something about the X509 on my exam. So if you have never seen that before or have no idea, you should just know. And a digital certificate is an electronic file that is used to verify users' identity. So you'll see very specific and the same information in the digital certificate. You'll see, for example, the version, the serial number, the subject, algorithm that's being used, and as well as these other optional information and fields. So you don't necessarily need to know these. You really just need to know, for example, the things we talked about earlier, which were about the CA and the RA, and then the purpose of a digital certificate and the fact that it follows the X509 framework. So the PKI infrastructure is based on a hierarchy of trust. It allows communication between parties that were previously unknown. So again, this is how you can verify that, hey, I'm actually who I say I am. And then if the CAs or the RAs, become, unsafe, then, you don't have this hierarchy of trust anymore. So it all depends on this system being in place. All right, so we've got a couple of people in here. I'm going to kick off our game of Kahoot as promised, and then we will get back to the rest of the material, because we have one at the beginning and the end. So Ulsh is not able to participate, but the rest of you feel free to jump in. Is it Triopia? I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. Are you going to hop in? You can let me know in this.
Yeah, I'm going to do it now.
Cool. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yep, that was correct.
Okay, cool.
I'm putting the PIN number in now.
And as always, if you are the winner, please contact me so I can send you some swag. All right, we will get started. So if you're new to this, you answer your question on the device. Which of the following is considered a passive recon action? You are not touching the Zoom screen, just the device that you logged in. All right. Did not come to play, huh, guys and ladies? All right. Which encryption was selected by NIST as the principal method for providing confidentiality after DES? Yep, I just told you this. It is AES. All right. Number 3, which tool is able to conduct a man-in-the-middle attack on an 802.3 environment? Yep, Cain and Abel is correct. All right, she's on fire. Number 4, true or false? Burp Suite can be used to conduct a man-in-the-middle attack. Yes, this is true. We actually saw Burp Suite in use the other day, maybe a couple weeks ago in our lab. So those labs are available on the blackgirlshack.org website if you did not check them out. What is the difference between a traditional firewall and an IPS? Yes, IPS can detect packets, intrusion prevention systems, if you did not know. So they can actually take action, whereas the other, like IDS, for example, cannot. And firewalls do, in fact, generate logs. All right. Number 6, why is it important to scan your target network slowly? Yep, that must have been easy. You do not want to alert the IDS. T is still on top. Number 7, in which phase of the ethical hacking framework do you alter or delete log information? Yep, we do it when you're covering tracks. Even ethical hackers, red teamers, cover your tracks so that you do not leave any evidence that you were there. KR is on top, followed by T and then DES. Nmath is only for port scanning. This is true. It is not. Number 9, which algorithm is a symmetric stream cipher? RC4. All right, number 10. A SYN scan completes what action? Yes, it is a half open. A full scan does a SYN, SYNAC, and ACK. True or false? The most important part of a penetration test is obtaining root. People of my own heart. Yes, the most important part is to obtain permission, written permission. It's more fun when you get root though. All right, next up, number 12. What method of exploitation allows the adversary to test SQL queries? Yep, SQL injection. All right, number 13, true or false? The OWASP top 10 are the top network threats. False, it is the top wireless. Maybe that was not clear. I'm sorry, web. I'm sorry, web, not wireless. Open web. All right, next up, number 14. XSS is considered a client-side attack. It is, in fact. All right. Number 15, with no information about the network, you are doing what type of test? Yep, that is a black box text. I made up semi-blind. It's not a real thing. All right, so our podium, number 3, Des. Number 2, T. Number 1, KR. No, Alsh's wishing he could have gotten in on this action. Next time. All right, so KR sent me a message. We actually have some Min stickers coming out soon, so maybe I'll wait and send you some of those. All right, PGP. So PGP is used, instead of using a CA for centralized verification, PGP uses a web of trust. So this is used in the same types of ways for signing, compression, encryption, emails, files, directories, and even whole disk partitions. It follows the PGP standard, which is RFC 4880. You may actually see some of those RFCs on your exam. It's just requests for comments, but you should just know the common ones for different standards in case you see those. Digital signatures allow the receiver to verify the identity of the sender and the integrity of the content. So you get a 2 for 1. All right, so signatures. The valid digital signature gives the recipient verification that the message was created by a known signature. The first message is hashed, then hashed message is then encrypted by the sender's private key. The recipient decrypts it and then has the result using the public key to identify that it actually came from that person. So you get authentication as well. I'm sorry, non-repudiation. All right, so security architecture. Architecture should identify the analysis, design, planning, and implementation of security functions. So there's the EISA, which is Enterprise Information Security Architecture. It's a collection of requirements and processes that help to determine how organizations' information systems are built. And there's also an IT security architecture and framework, which is a document or set of documents describing information security guidelines, policies, procedures, and standards. There is also NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It also has a cybersecurity framework that highlights the phrases in which businesses should consider implementing security controls. So they do this based on 5 areas, which are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. NIST also has a pretty cool cybersecurity workforce framework that you should use if you need to update your resume. All right, so next up is the SOA, which is the service-oriented architecture. You should just know what this means because I've actually seen this. It is an API that makes it easier for application components to cooperate and exchange information on systems connected over a network. Okay, so this basically just makes it so that different programmers, different programming languages can communicate across systems. So services are abstracted and function as black boxes, so programmers do not need to know how the service works internally. Communication protocols are well defined and services can utilize existing protocols without needing to create new communication methods. And by having the services abstracted, if it only if it becomes compromised, the attacker only gets access to that memory space and not everything else. So you should just know that this is a service-oriented architecture. You may just see it as SOA. All right, so we have discussed previous times before about information security incidents. They're basically occurrences or weaknesses indicating a possible breach of security policies or failures of safeguards or a previously unknown situation which may be relevant to your security posture. The exploitation of a security vulnerability is the simple definition. All right, so N-tier architecture, AKA multi-tier architecture. You see this a lot these days. It distributes processes across multiple servers. Each tier consists of a single role carried out by one or more, or even a cluster of computer systems, typically carried out in a 3-tier, but it is called an N-tier because you can have more than just 3. So there's the presentation tier, the logic tier, and the data tier, where we're talking about the 3-tier architecture. And then there's also a model view controller, which you can see the different parts there. All right, so TCP IP networking, we talked about a little bit of this, probably 14, 15 weeks ago. This is the OSI model on this graphic, as well as the TCP IP model, as well as the protocols. You should specifically for this know what operation protocols operate. So for example, you may need to know, where does encryption happen within these models. So if you get a question like that, you should know, where it happens, all right? So TCP is a set of communication protocols that allow hosts on a network to talk to each other. The application layer hands things down to the transport layer. Transport layer utilizes the lower TCP or UDP to establish connections with the end. The internet layer accepts and delivers packets, and the network access layer is responsible for the physical delivery of frames. So you should know which PDU, which type of object each level deals with. So the network access deals with frames, the higher levels deals with packets. So you should just know what they deal with in case if they ask you, like, for example, segments or, whatever the case may be. Like I said, the other thing is just knowing at what level different applications operate at. Okay, so for the most part, things happen at the application level, but it really just depends. Like we're talking about most applications, but some of them do not. So you should know, for example, like ping happens over the internet level or the network level in the OSI model. So you should just be aware where different things happen. So I remember this a couple of ways. Please do not, I say, please do not teach people acronyms. Some people say, please do not take sausage pizza anyway. There's a lot of different acronyms you can use to remember this, but you should just know, that this is layer 1, this is layer 7, and then it matches up to this in the TCP IP model, and know which, ports and protocols are used. So you should know, for example, HTTP is port 80, but we've talked about that a lot over the last few weeks. All right, and then security testing methodology, open source security testing methodology manual, which is the OSSTMM. It's a peer-reviewed methodology for security testing and analysis. There are different types of compliance testing, legislative, contractual, or standards-based, and it's created by the Institute for Security and Open Methodologies. Also, there's the OWASP, which is, I think it's the open, I want to say web application security. Why is this escaping me? I can't remember what it is, but you should just know that there's the OWASP top 10. There's one for the web. There's one for mobile devices that almost looks exactly the same, maybe has some of the slight differences, but you should know what the OWASP is. Also, one of the things that I'm going to give in the makeup lab, so I'm still making up for you, is a look at some of these OWASP types of exploits, like the SQL injection and different vulnerabilities through web applications. So pen testing methodology, which we talked about a lot. And then also SANS has a lot of different white papers that provide security testing methodologies. There's also like, it's called the PTES, which is the standard for reports for security testing. So it's not just going out there and hacking. You also have to write up a report detailing what you found and why the organization should care about what you found. All right, so that is 14. We will do 15, then we will do the final Kahoot. So 15, we are talking about information security assessment methodologies. These are the chapters as the other one that are in the 5th domain. This is actually the week 15 materials. And we're still talking about the procedures and methodologies, which is 8% of your exam. So we're going to be talking about the web server attack methodology, web application hacking methodology, SQL injection. Like I said, we're going to be seeing this in the labs, wireless and Bluetooth hacking methodology, mobile platform things, and then mobile rooting and jailbreaking. All right, so web server attack stages as identified by the EC Council. This is not the same as what you may see elsewhere in the world. You should just know that this is the way that EC Council, which is the maker of the CEH text, which you may or may not be taking soon, defines this. So you have information gathering, web server footprinting, website mirroring, vulnerability scanning, session hijacking, and the web server password cracking. So over the course of the last, I guess the first 11 or 12 weeks of labs, we did, I think, all of this information so far. So as I think I mentioned earlier, next week, the makeups are going to just include the different websites, the OWASP, different types of attacks. And then next week at the end of our final lecture, we will be going through an end-to-end just so you can be familiar with the whole end-to-end process. And we're going to do it against the broken web app using the Kali machine. All right, so information gathering. We're talking about OSINT here, okay? So internet assertions about the target. We're talking about, figuring out whether or not a username is used in multiple places. Talking about whether or not email is used in different places. Gathering information before you actually start interacting with your targets or your targets, okay? So it's just finding out information that's available online. Who owns the domain, who are the technical people for the thing, what phone numbers, what physical location information might be there, what websites, reviewing the robots.txt file. As you guys have probably seen, if you've ever been in rooms when we were talking about the ethical hacking process, whenever I get to a web app, one of the first things I do is check the robots.txt file, because this tells spiders where not to crawl for indexing, but it also tells your friendly neighborhood hackers what you don't want people looking at, okay? So when you look at the robots.txt file, it says, hey, I don't want you looking at, for example, this upload folder. That tells you that there's an upload folder there to look at, so that might be an attack vector that you can use to access the web server. So web server footprinting, we talked about a lot of different ways. I think there were maybe probably 4 or 5 for banner grabbing. Okay, we talked about the netcraft, we talked about telnet, as well as some other ways that you can use to do banner grabbing, which is basically just a fancy way of saying, hey, what application is running on that port? What version of that application is it? Okay, so once you get that information, that you have successfully banner grabbed. So if you get a question that asks you, hey, they did this, but it didn't come back with any port information, or it didn't come back with something, but you can see what's running on there. Like it tells you it's an Apache web server, it's version 2 point something, then you have successfully done a banner grab and you were successful in banner grabbing. So you should just be aware if you see those types of questions about what banner grabbing is. Like I said, again, it's just to figure out what version of the software is being used and also maybe what operating system, okay? So enumerating web servers. So Nmap can be used for enumeration. It can also be used for scanning, as we discussed. It can be used for a lot of different things as well, because Nmap has a pretty comprehensive scripting engine, which you can use to do a lot of different things. We also did some vulnerability searching, identification, and even some exploiting in Nmap. So Nmap is not just a scanning tool. It is a tool of all trades, but I think it's pretty necessary for this ethical hacking thing that we're trying to do. So I call this CEH exam the INMAP exam, because a lot of the questions, and I'm telling you, a lot of the questions are specifically about flags, which is like these dashes type things that are options for INMAP. So you should know, for example, like that dash A gives you the operating system, it gives you the trace route, it gives you the banner grabbing, it gives you, all of those things, but it's not the most effective. It's not the quickest. You should know that there are dash T flags, which go from 0 to 5, where 0 is the slowest and 5 is the fastest. And the default, I think, is either 3 or 4. But the faster you are, the more noisy you make, and the more likely it is that your friendly blue team person is going to pick up what it is that you're doing, which is why you want to try to go slowly when you're doing most things, and you want to try to make the least amount of noise as possible. There are also different scripts that you can use, as you can see on here. So if you've got, like, for example, an INMAP cheat sheet, you should definitely take a look at it. This script here about the HTTP robots, you should know that there's different, like there's one that's called HTTP methods, for example. And this attack is specifically against port 80. So it's specifically looking at a web server. Okay, so you should know when you see these INMAPs that what each one of the flags mean, and what why you're using those flags as opposed to other flags. All right, so next up, website mirroring. So we've done this a couple of different ways. I think we did wget. I think I also included information about HTTP track in one of the past ones. There are also other website mirroring tools that you can use. Black Widow, Web Copier Pro, Web Ripper, and Surf Online are all different ways of mirroring an image. So why do you care about mirroring an image? Okay, so if I interact with a website that is live, they may get an indication of something that I'm doing, right? But if you were able to take a mirror image of the website, then you could be able to do things such as password cracking. You could be able to do a lot of different things, analyze the website, run scans against it without it being online and without, them being notified, so that you can get an idea of the architecture, an idea of what's in there, without having to worry about, showing up on someone's list. So website mirroring is definitely an important part of the web server attack methodology. Vulnerability scanning. So this is also very important. There are some jobs who just do vulnerability scanning as a part of their, their day-to-day. It's a vulnerability scan is an application that identifies, creates an inventory of all the systems connected to the network. Okay, so you'll see in your vulnerability scanner results that come back, like to tell you, what the level of threats are, whether or not they're informational, whether they're high risk or low risk. And then some cases it'll tell you, what the name of the CVE was and, where to download and exploit. So it really just depends on what you're using. Okay, so we specifically looked at Nessus, which was available for 1 week when you downloaded. It is a commercial solution and it's not free. I believe we looked at Nikto at some point, and OpenVAS is actually the open source version of Nessus, but and it comes default on, I believe, on Kali. But I had issues with trying to get it to work, so which is why I ended up using Nessus. But OpenVAS is definitely an application that you may use. And then also Wireshark. Okay, so Wireshark allows you to do, the packet sniffing to be able to understand the network traffic as well as see a lot of things that are going on. Okay, so you can try to determine what vulnerabilities are in a network by just looking at the packets. All right, so web server attack methodology, session hijacking. So this is basically the exploitation of a valid computer session or a session key in order to gain unauthorized access to a system. Okay, so the use case for this is that you have someone who's already logged in. You're logged in as me. And then you're going to say, hey, I want this session key for Tanisha. So I'm going to be Tanisha and I'm going to go and purchase all of the things using her card on Amazon because I took her session. Okay, so that's the purpose of session hijacking, is so that you can be able to complete actions as the person who is legitimately logged in. Okay, So you sniff the traffic in between the client and server. You monitor the traffic and predict the sequence numbering, because as we know, sequence numbering is a part of the TCP. We do synchronize the session client, predict the session token, and take over the session. So this injects packets to the target server. So this is just another one of those web server attack methodologies. So if you find yourself a little rusty on your web server attack methodologies, there are a crap load of OWASP applications and examples and tools that you can use on your Kali machine. I'm sorry, on your broken web app machine. Okay. Let me just show you this real quick if my computer decides not to be done. Okay, speak now. But you can, we accessed it, I want to say on the What You Do With Your Home Lab, there's a walkthrough on there about the different things that you can do to test your web application skills on your Kali machine in your home lab, so that you don't even have to go to another website in order to do it. You can test most types of web server attacks, directly on your home lab. So it makes it very convenient, and you don't have to worry about someone noticing what you're doing and then calling the police. All right, so we also talked about password cracking. We used a couple of tools to do this. John is our go-to, but there are other ways as well. We also saw that, for example, if there is a hash is a one-way. It is not reversible like a normal password is. So for hashes, you have to actually make a comparison of the hash value to a rainbow table, for example. So if you are asked, for example, like how do you decode for example, a hashed value like an MD5 or a SHA, the answer is you cannot. You have to just compare it with a rainbow table to try to figure out, if there's a known hash for that word. But for most other things, like for example, we did some command line decoding and encoding base 64, and I think we did the SHA, but not the MD5, because of course that's the one way. All right, so there's non-electronic, active online, passive online, and then offline. So there are a lot of different ways. You don't want to, for example, do a dictionary attack on a regular system, because most systems say after, let's call it 3 incorrect pass attempts, they put you on timeout or lock the account, okay? But if you do this offline, let's say, for example, you manage to get their database and you've copied their website, you could try to do a dictionary attack or some kind of brute force attack in an offline means, okay? So it doesn't necessarily need to be online. And just as a general rule, I probably wouldn't recommend doing a brute force on an active online, just because of the fact that, you're probably going to get found out pretty quickly, because there are a lot of different controls that are put in place to prevent people from being able to try a whole bunch of different passwords. You probably realize that if you've ever forgotten your password in one of those locations. All right, so an injection attack. Okay. This is about injecting malicious commands into an input string. So for example, you can say, hey, I want to inject a file, or I want to inject a command. You say at the end of the attack, like you want an ls to show everything that's in the folder. Some web sites, if they don't appropriately check to make sure to do sanitation, for example, or verify, will actually allow you to inject commands and execute them so that you can see the information. And shell injection, and then there's also the LDAP injection. So a lot of different types of injection attacks, but like I said, most of these are available on your Kali machine to allow you to be able to test these different types of activities. But you should know, for example, what an injection attack looks like. You should know that it probably involves, for example, like a semicolon followed by like an ls, or maybe a semicolon followed by like a sudo. You actually just putting a command into the URL so that you can try to execute it, because it's not being sanitized, or it's not being prevented by the web application. So that you should, like I said, you can practice these on your Kali machine. It's not my Kali machine because it's not working. All right, so web application hacking methodologies is also buffer overflow. I think that Jedi actually did this 2 weeks ago on Friday Night Labs. He talked about some of the buffer overflows, and then cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery. I can't tell you how many times I saw this on my exam. It was a lot. You should know what this is. You should know how to do it. So you should actually practice some of these web attacks, because it'll ask you some cryptic message like, if you see this, what type of attack they're doing, so you should know, what a cross-site scripting looks like versus the cross-site request forgery. Okay. So, and like I said, if you need practice, you can do this on your Kali machine with your broken web app. There's WebGoat on there. There's Multiliday. There's Ghost. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can use on your damn vulnerable web app that you can use to test these different OWASP web application exploits. Also, cookies. You may be able to, for example, if you're using what is it called? Burp Suite, for example, to take a look at the cookies that are being sent back and forth, or if you're looking at in your web developer inspection, you might be able to see the cookies and determine something just based on the cookie amount, the cookie value. Okay, so that's something that you might be able to use and manipulate to be able to change the pricing. I think we did this last week with the trolls. I want to say maybe it was Friday Night Labs. HTTP attack, which is also called HTTP response splitting. Okay, so you should know what this looks like and know what this involves. All right, SQL injection. So this is one of the ones that you're going to see a lot when we do our makeup lab. When I post the makeup lab for you to take a look at, because you'll see this a lot, and this you'll get asked about this a lot. It's basically inserting SQL code into a web server to try to get information. So the backbone of most web applications is a database that allows you to add, delete, move, update, or view data. Okay, so if you can just dump a user's table, you might be able to get their password. If you can dump a credit card table, you might be able to get credit card information or patient data or anything else. Okay, so a lot of times you'll see, for example, on capture the flag competitions, where they will give you a .db file and say, hey, go find out what happened, and you have to go take a look at the file, be able to analyze it and determine what happened. Okay, so there's a lot of different tools that are available natively on Kali to allow you to do this, which is why we use Kali as our attack machine, because a lot of the stuff is built in, and we don't have to download it unless you just need to see other types of things that don't come natively on Kali. And most common and most successful injection attacks are SQL injection. Okay, so when an attacker injects SQL queries directly into an input form, so it could be like a username field, and instead of actually putting in a username field, you put like the one that we commonly see is the semicolon and then like 1 = 1, which basically says, hey, just give me everything, and then it'll just dump the database. Okay, so you should know what a SQL injection looks like. You should know the different types of SQL injection. I specifically remember seeing something on my exam about blind. And blind just means that if it's an unblind, so if you can see, then what that means is that all of the database errors are spilled onto the screen. So you can actually see, oh, this is a MySQL database, or hey, oh, this is, whatever. Okay. But in blind, you don't actually see the error messages. You can just see whether or not the thing was successful or not. So you might get some situations where you need to do a blind SQL injection. So you should just know what it is that you're looking for, what you're not going to actually see. All right, so SQL injection. This is what I was talking about, where you might see, for example, in this one, this was like a tick and then or 1 = 1, right? So this is entered instead of a user ID, and then it just reads so it says, hey, the user ID equals blank or true. 1 = 1 just means true. So what this is going to say is something or true, which results to true, and then it'll just dump all the user IDs. Okay, so if your friendly neighborhood web developer didn't, make it so that you can't execute SQL injections in your input forms, then you may be able to just use that to find out all of the information in the user ID field, for example. But it could also be used, for example, for credit cards or any other field that are held in the database. All right, so SQL injection evasion. How do you avoid this? So the use of stored procedures is one of them. Whitelisting basic input validation. Input validation is a big deal. If you're not validating what's being entered, then anything can be put in. Prepared statement with parameterized queries, which help ensure that the attacker is not able to change the intent of the query, even if the SQL commands are inserted. Okay, so it makes it so that you cannot, for example, change it from, hey, select all from the table where the username equals something, and then you say, hey, I'm going to make that empty and just give me, another table that's in there that's not related to the username. Okay, so that's prepared statement. And then escaping all user supplies, which is escapes the input using proper escaping scheme for databases you're using. Your database management system will not confuse that input with SQL code written by the developer. So a way to, escape any code that's input on the front end. Okay, so there are different ways that as a web developer that you can ensure that you're not able to do these different types of injections. But SQL injection is still, I think, the #1 in the top 10 web application vulnerabilities. So there are still a lot of developers who are not doing it. So this is still a big deal, and there's still a common way to be able to get into web application servers. All right, so wireless Bluetooth hacking methodology. Bluetooth is basically connecting devices wirelessly over short distance. We know that Bluetooth is notoriously insecure. And there are a lot of different attacks that happen, and they mirror the types of attacks. So the way that you know that this is actually a Bluetooth attack is specifically that they all start with the word blue. So you have blue smacking, and I did see a bunch of these on my exam. So you have blue smacking, which is a denial of service. Blue jacking is sending unsolicited messages to, which I think we've probably all had. Blue sniffing, which is an effort to discover Bluetooth-enabled devices. Blue bugging, which is accessing it and remotely using a feature. The blue snarfing is the theft of data, and the blue printing, which is Bluetooth footprinting, collecting device information over Bluetooth. So the best way to avoid having to deal with Bluetooth threats or vulnerabilities is to basically turn your Bluetooth off when you're not using it. Use it for what you need to. If you have Bluetooth headsets, for example, when you're not using them, turn them off. Turn off the Bluetooth functionality on your device. So there are a lot of different Bluetooth hacking tools. Let's see, super Bluetooth hack. There's the blue scanner, which is going to allow you to find Bluetooth devices around you, blue sniff, blue over, and phone snoop. So for the most part, you'll see that most of these things say blue. So if you see that, you know that it's talking about something Bluetooth related. And then of course, phone snoop, which doesn't say blue, but it is still about Bluetooth. Some other wireless and Bluetooth hacking methodologies, rogue access points, which are access points that are not authorized to connect to a network. An evil twin, which is me creating an SSID that mirrors your real SSID to get people to be able to connect to my device so that I can be able to see their traffic and figure out what they're doing. Cracking encryption and authentication mechanisms. So you can use WEP, WPA, and Cisco's EAP authentication to connect to WLAN using stolen credentials. People still use WEP in 2021. So, we've seen that it can be cracked. Password sniffing, which is capturing passwords or other information from an unencrypted wireless or hotspot, which is why we suggest that you use a VLAN anytime you're connecting to a hotspot or a wireless network that's not yours. Denial of service and MAC spoofing. Those are also two other methodologies that are used. All right, so mobile platforms. So we're talking about all of your mobile devices. This is like mobile device management hacking methodology. So third-party applications, so things that you don't get through, for example, your traditional marketplaces. So like your Google App Store, your iPhone store. Data leakage from the application. So as data is transmitted between the user and the application, data can be leaked and used by the attacker. Data leakage from rogue networks. So they can be connected over wireless networks if you're not using a VPN, so they could be sniffing all of your traffic. So if you're using insecure technologies, then they might be able to see, for example, your top secret password that's being sent in a clear. And then malware, spyware collecting information from mobile devices. And again, bad programming. If you're not doing sanitation, you're not doing handling of session data so that the session can be impersonated, then they can do, for example, intercept your session and take it over so they can buy all the things from Amazon. Then you have SMS phishing. So this is basically like just all of the same type of attacks that we see on regular devices, but you see them coming across your SMS message. So for example, if you click on a link on your phone and that comes across the SMS message, phishing still works. They'll still convince you to log into a fake AT&T and then get your password. All right, Android Trojans, spyware, and tracking are different types of programs that are out there that are available on the different devices. There's also, so Find My iPhone, Where's My Droid, Android Lost, all different types of things to help track your device, but could be used for good, but then it also could be used for bad. And then rooting. So, especially when the iPhones came out, talked about rooting so that you could, for example, take your device and use it for another, cell phone provider or something like that, or you want to be able to get applications that you wouldn't normally be able to get through your app store. So you may do mobile device rooting or jailbreaking, which is basically performing some type of action that grants you administrative access to a device. So it allows you to access things that you should be able to access. So rooting is the name given to the process on Android devices. So there are a lot of different programs that you can use: Kingo Root, TunesGo, One Click Root, and MTK Droid. Jailbreaking, which is specifically for iOS. These are the applications that are available. You should just know, just as far as jailbreaking techniques, that there are generally 3: untethered, semi-tethered, and tethered. So you should just know the different definitions of these 3. And basically it's about the level of being patched or unpatched that they are in comparison with each other. All right, and we are on to our final game of Kahoot. Give me 1 second to look this up. Any questions before we get there? All right. All right, so the Kahoot pen is up. May the odds be forever in your favor. All right, we will get started. Dez has made himself more secure. He is now triple Dez. All right, number 1, what scanning tool is more likely going to yield accurate results for the hacker? Yep, Nmap. Good job. Why would an attacker conduct an open TCP connection scan using NCAT? Yep, the hacker's trying to see what ports are open for connection. You guys did not come to play today, huh? All right. In a Windows file, SAM file, an admin account is indicated by 500. Yep, too easy. Which regional internet registry is responsible for North and South America? All right, so RIPE is the one for Europe. ARIN is the American. This is for Latin America, and I think this one is just made up. All right, next up, number 5. What does war dialing involve? War dialing. See, a lot of you are not old enough to know this, but war dialing actually involves a modem. All right, number 6, which command can be used to indicate the specific number of pings? Yes, so this was actually on my exam. The normal command to indicate the number of pings is -C, but on a Windows machine specifically, it is -N. So this actually threw me for a loop. So you should just not let it throw you for a loop. All right, true or false? Would you expect to see FTP on port 22? You would not. FTP is port 21 or 20. All right, KR is on fire. Which application uses 2 ports? I've told on myself. All right, number 9, true or false? The first step of an ethical hacking engagement is written permission. It is. All right, and number 10, what step comes after enumeration in the ethical hacking cycle? Escalating privileges. Scanning and enumeration happen at the same time. Scanning actually happens before enumeration. What step comes after enumeration? All right, I'll take a look at this. I think it should be escalate privileges. All right, let's see. Number 11, an ethical hacker is sending TCP packets to a machine with the send flag set. What type of port scan is this? Yep, this is a half open or a stealth scan, same thing. You should know that stealth is another way to refer to it. All right, let's see where we're at. In third place, T. Triple Des in number 2, and number 1 with the repeat, Krishna. All right, that is it for today. Any questions? Again, next week we will be doing, I will be posting the makeup labs for you to do. They're going to be basically OWASP things. And then during our class, after we do the week 14 and 15 material, which is about ethics policies, it's relatively quick. We are going to do an end-to-end on our Broken Web app, just so you are familiar. And then I think that's all you need as far as the lab. It's just the OWASP, different activities, and then just doing the full end-to-end, seeing how all the pieces work, fit together. So any questions for me?
Thank you.
All right. Well, you guys have a good night, and I will see you in the Slack.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks, Tanisha. So
Bye.
are we happy with the 2 more sessions, Tanisha?
I think it's just one more.
Okay, next Monday, right?
Yeah. So it'll be two weeks worth of materials because it's very short, and then we'll do the end to end.